Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Dald is here to read for you Section 4 of Chapter 8, entitled Learning and Culture Flourish. Your focus question for this section will be what achievements in learning, literature, and the arts characterized the High and Late Middle Ages. In spite of the problems of students studying too much, or sometimes too little, medieval universities brought prestige and profit to the cities in which they were located. Local merchants provided students with housing, food, clothing, and entertainment, but students could also create problems for university communities. The priest Jacques de Vitry complained, "They were always fighting and engaging in scuffles." Who were these students, and why did universities begin to spring up in the 1100s? Medieval universities emerge. By the 1100s, Europe was experiencing dynamic changes. A more reliable food supply and the growth of trade in towns were signs of increased prosperity. The need for educated people grows. As economic and political conditions improved in the High Middle Ages, the need for education expanded. The church wanted better educated clergy. Royal rulers also needed literate men for their growing bureaucracies. By acquiring an education, the sons of wealthy townspeople might hope to qualify for high positions in the church or with royal governments. By the 1100s, schools had sprung up around the great cathedrals to train the clergy. Some of these cathedral schools evolved into the first universities. They were organized like guilds, with charters to protect the rights of members and establish standards for training. In the early 900s, the Italian city of Salerno had a respected medical school. Later, Bologna's University, founded in 58, it's actually Bologna, founded in 1158, became famous for legal studies. Paris and Oxford founded their universities in the later 1100s. Soon, other cities rushed to organize universities. Students often traveled from one university to another to study different subjects, seeking food and lodging from whatever patrons they could find to support them. Student life. University life offered few comforts. A bell wakened students at about 5 a.m. for prayers. Students then attended classes until 10 a.m., when they had their first meal of the day. Afternoon classes continued until 5 p.m. Students usually ate a light supper and then studied until bedtime. Because at first medieval universities did not have permanent buildings, classes were held in rented rooms or in the choir loft of a church. Students sat for hours on hard benches as the teacher dictated and then explained Latin texts. Students were expected to memorize what they heard. A program of study covered the 7 liberal arts: arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, music, grammar, rhetoric, and logic. There were separate programs for the further study of law, medicine, and theology. To show mastery of a subject, students took an oral exam. Earning a degree as a Bachelor of Arts took between 3 and 6 years. Only after several more years of study could a man qualify to become a Master of Arts and a teacher. Theology was the longest course of study. Women in education. Women were not allowed to attend universities, and so for the most part, they were also deprived of the mental stimulation that was an important part of university life. Without a university education, women could not become doctors, lawyers, or church officials. There were educated women, however. Some girls received good educations in convents, and girls from noble families attended classes at Notre Dame in Paris, located in the French capital. Some nuns became scholars and writers. The writer Christine de Pizan examined the issue of women's education. In The Cities of the Ladies, she asked Lady Reason whether women are less capable of learning and understanding as men insist. Lady Reason replies, if it were customary to send daughters to a school like sons, and if they were then taught the same subjects, they would learn as thoroughly and understand the subtleties of all the arts and sciences as well as sons. Still, men continued to look on educated women as oddities. Most medieval men felt that women should pursue their natural gifts at home, such as raising children, managing the house, doing needlework, and leave books and writing to men. Europeans acquire new learning. Universities received a further boost from the explosion of knowledge that reached Europe in the High Middle Ages. Many of the new ideas had originated in ancient Greece, but have been lost to Western Europeans after the fall of Rome. Muslim scholarship advances knowledge. Muslim scholars had translated the works of Aristotle and other Greek thinkers into Arabic. Their translations and knowledgeable commentaries on these ancient texts spread across the Muslim world. In Muslim Spain, Jewish and Christian scholars translated these works into Latin, the language of Christian European scholars. In the 1100s, when these new translations reached Western Europe, they initiated a revolution in the world of learning. Christian scholars struggled with new ideas. The writings of the ancient Greeks posed a challenge to Christian scholars. Aristotle taught that people should use reason to discover basic truths. Christians, however, accepted many ideas on faith. They believed that the church was the final authority on all questions. How could they use logic of Aristotle without undermining their Christian faith? Some Christian scholars tried to resolve the conflict between faith and reason. Their method, known as scholasticism, used reason to support Christian beliefs. Scholastics studied the works of the Muslim philosopher Averroes and the Jewish rabbi Maimonides. These thinkers, too, used logic to resolve the conflict between faith and reason. The writings of these philosophers influenced the famous scholastic Thomas Aquinas. In a monumental work, Summa Theologica, Aquinas concluded that faith and reason exist in harmony. Both lead to the same truth, that God rules over an orderly universe. Aquinas thus brought together Christian faith and classical Greek philosophy. New approaches to science and mathematics. Scientific works, translated from Arabic and Greek, also reached Europe and Spain and the Byzantine Empire. Christian scholars studied Hippocrates on medicine and Euclid on geometry, along with works by Arab scientists. They saw, too, how Aristotle had used observation and experimentation to study the physical world. Yet science made little real progress in Europe in the Middle Ages because most scholars still believed that all true knowledge must fit within church teachings. It would take many centuries before Christian thinkers changed the way they viewed the physical world. During this period, Europeans adopted Hindu-Arabic numerals, which were much easier to use than the cumbersome system of Roman numerals that had been traditional throughout Europe for centuries. In time, the use of Arabic numerals, as they are commonly called, allowed both scientists and mathematicians to make extraordinary advances in their field. Medieval literature. While Latin remained the written language of scholars and churchmen, new writings began to appear in the vernacular, or everyday languages of ordinary people, such as French, German, and Italian. These writings captured the spirit of the High and Late Middle Ages. Medieval literature included epics, or long narrative poems about knights and chivalry, as well as tales of the common people. Heroic epics captivate. Across Europe, people began writing down oral traditions in the vernacular. French pilgrims traveling to holy sites loved to hear the chansons de geste, or songs of the heroic deeds. The most popular was the Song of Roland, written around 1100, which praises the courage of one of Charlemagne's knights. A true chivalric hero, Roland loyally sacrifices his life out of the sense of honor. Spain's great epic, Poem of the Cid, tells the story of Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, a bold and fiery Christian lord who fought both with and against Muslim forces. His nickname El Cid comes from the Arabic word for love. Dante's Divine Comedy. In the middle of the journey of life, I found myself in a dark wood where the straight way was lost. So begins the Divine Comedy, written in the early 1300s by the Italian poet Dante Alighieri. The poem takes the reader on an imaginary journey into hell and purgatory, where the soul awaits forgiveness. Finally, in the third section, Dante describes a vision of heaven. Abandon all hope, ye that enter here, is the warning Dante receives as he approaches hell. There he talks with people from history who tell how they earned a place in hell. Humor, tragedy, and the endless medieval quest for religious understanding are all ingredients in Dante's poem. His journey summarizes Christian ethics, showing how people's actions in life determine their fate in the afterlife. Chauncey's Canterbury Tales. In the Canterbury Tales, the English writer Geoffrey Chaucer describes a band of pilgrims traveling to St. Thomas Becket's tomb. In brilliant word portraits, he sketches a range of characters including a knight, a plowman, a merchant, a miller, a monk, and a nun. Each character tells a story to entertain the group. Whether funny, romantic, or bawdy, each tale adds to our picture of medieval life. Art and architecture. In the Middle Ages, wrote French author Victor Hugo, men who had great thought that they did not write down in stone. Those writings were the great buildings of the Middle Ages. With riches from trade and commerce, townspeople, nobles, and monarchs indulged in a flurry of building. Their greatest achievements were in the towering stone cathedrals that served as symbols of their wealth and religious devotion. From Romanesque to Gothic. In the year 1000, monasteries and towns were building solid stone churches that reflected Roman influences. These Romanesque churches looked like fortresses with thick walls and towers. Typically, the roof of a Romanesque church was a barrow vault, a strong tunnel of stone that covered the main part of the structure. It was heavy, supported by massive walls with no windows, or only tiny slits of windows for fear of weakening the support for the roof. As a result, the interior of Romanesque church was dark and gloomy. About 1140, Abbot Suger wanted to build a new abbey church at Saint Denis near Paris. He hoped that it would shine with wonderful and uninterrupted light. There, builders developed what became known as the Gothic style of architecture. Its most important feature was the flying buttresses, or stone supports that stood outside the church. These supports allowed builders to construct higher, thinner walls and leave space for large stained glass windows. Gothic churches soared to incredible heights. Their graceful spires and tall windows carried the eye upward to the heavens. Since their brilliance let the splendor of the true light pass into the church, declared a medieval visitor, they enlightened those inside. Making art in stone and glass. As churches rose, stonemasons carved sculptures to decorate them both inside and out. In addition to scenes from the Bible and the lives of the saints, sculptures included lifelike forms of plants and animals. They also carved whimsical or frightening images of mythical creatures such as dragons and unicorns. At the same time, other skilled craft workers created stained glass windows that added to the splendor of the Gothic churches. These artisans stained small pieces of glass in glowing colors. Then they set the pieces in thin lead frames to create pictures depicting the life of Jesus, a biblical event, or other religious themes. These religious pictures helped educate many people who were unable to read. Paintings, manuscripts, and tapestries. Churches also contained religious paintings called altarpieces. The purpose of these paintings, and similar ones that wealthy people had in their homes, was to symbolize religious ideas. In this Gothic style, religious figures were not meant to look like real people in real settings, but rather to inspire devotion. In the 1300s and 1400s, the Gothic style was also applied to the artistic decorations of books known as illumination. Since the early medieval ages, monks, nuns, and other skilled artisans had illuminated books with intricate designs and miniature paintings of biblical scenes and daily life. They often featured brilliant colors and decorative detail. Artists decorated prayer books known as books of hours, with depictions of towns and castles, knights and ladies, and peasants in the fields. Medieval artists also created paintings in thread. Stone castles were drafty and cold. Tapestries, or woven wall hangings, were hung in the castle rooms and halls to add color and warmth. One of the most famous, the Bayeux tapestry, is really a huge embroidery 231 feet long. Its 70 scenes depict the Norman conquest of England, and historians have used it to learn about that event. That's it for Chapter 8, Section 4. Thanks for listening. Have a great day, guys.